This is DeMarco Williams. On the surface, he looks like any other nervous young man sitting in a police station parking lot, gripping a steering wheel, trying to slow his breathing down. Officers are walking toward his car. He knows they're coming. He invited them here. What the officers don't know, what they have absolutely no reason to suspect, is that less than 24 hours ago, DeMarco's girlfriend, Kayla, was alive, sitting in this same seat, telling him something he didn't want to hear. And right now, in the back of this car, underneath two blankets, a gym bag and an old fast food bag he grabbed to make it look like everyday clutter. Kayla is still there. She never left. The officers reach the car. One of them leans in toward the window and smiles. "You mind if we take a quick look in the back?" DeMarco doesn't flinch. He pops the trunk himself. Over the next several weeks, a man who drove a dead body to a police station and walked away will make a series of decisions so calm, so calculated, and so coldly ordinary that the investigators assigned to find Kayla will begin to question everything they think they know about how killers behave. They'll search his house. They'll download his phone. They'll sit across from him in an interrogation room while he cries real tears and asks them sincerely if they've considered that maybe she was trafficked. And every single time, they'll let him go. What finally breaks this case open isn't a confession, it isn't a witness, it isn't even a detective. It's a dog clawing at a wall in a house officers had already cleared and called clean. But before we get there, I need you to understand something about Kayla that the headlines never tell you. She wasn't just a missing girl. She was the kind of person who made decisions quickly and without apology. The kind of woman who, when she finally made up her mind about something, didn't call 3 friends first or sleep on it for a week. She just did it. And on the last night of her life, she made a decision she had been working up to for months. She was going to end it with DeMarco. She'd told her sister that morning. She'd been calm about it, almost relieved, like something heavy had already lifted off her just from saying it out loud. "I'm going over there tonight, I just want to do it and be done." Her sister asked her if she wanted company. Kayla said no. She said she'd call when she was on her way home. That call never came. At 6:41 p.m., Kayla's phone pings a cell tower 3 blocks from DeMarco's apartment. At 6:44 p.m., a neighbor's doorbell camera catches her car pulling into his complex. She parks, she gets out, she looks completely fine. By 9:00 p.m., the same car is on the move, but Kayla isn't driving it. The figure behind the wheel is larger, the posture is different, and the route the car takes makes no sense for someone heading home. It doesn't go toward Kayla's apartment. It doesn't go toward the highway. It goes in slow, deliberate loops through 3 different residential streets before pulling into a quiet cul-de-sac, sitting completely still for 4 minutes, and then the lights go off. A figure gets out, leaves the car there, and walks away into the dark. The next morning, Kayla's sister makes the call she hoped she'd never have to make. By afternoon, police are at DeMarco's door. And this is where this story stops being about a missing girl and becomes something that will make you question how we identify monsters, because DeMarco doesn't run. He doesn't panic. He doesn't lawyer up immediately or refuse to speak. He opens the door, shakes the officer's hand, and says, genuinely and warmly, "I've been worried sick, come in." He shows them his text messages. He walks them through his house. He laughs at one point, not in a disturbing way, but in that easy, disarming way that makes people feel like they're overreacting. He tells them Kayla left around 9, said she was going to see a friend. He says he thought it was strange when she didn't text back, but you know how she is. You know how girls are, she's probably fine. And this is the part I keep coming back to, when officers ask if they can take a quick look around, DeMarco Williams says yes before they finish the sentence. He leads them through every room. He even jokes with one of the officers about the mess in his bedroom. What he doesn't show them is the attic. Nobody asks about the attic. 2 days later, DeMarco agrees to come to the station. He drives himself there in his stepfather's SUV, which seems unremarkable until officers notice the car is riding slightly low in the back. They notice he keeps glancing in the rearview. They notice there's something stacked behind the rear seats, covered with blankets that he doesn't mention. When they ask him about it in the parking lot, casually, no accusation, just "Hey, what's in the back?" DeMarco says. "Oh, that, just stuff from the drive-in, blankets, some snacks, you can look if you want." He opens the trunk himself. Officers look through the blankets. They find pillows, a water bottle, a Philly cheesesteak wrapper. They thank him for his cooperation. They let him go. What they don't know, what no one will know for another 3 weeks, is that this is the second time DeMarco has driven Kayla's remains within feet of the people searching for her. And both times he walked away. What finally stops him isn't a mistake he makes. It's a mistake he already made, one so small, so seemingly irrelevant, that he had no reason to think it would ever matter. Stay with me. Because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly how a man sits across from homicide detectives, cries for a missing girlfriend, and passes every single informal test they put in front of him. And you're going to understand what finally broke him. If you're new here, this is Time with X, where we don't just tell you what happened, we show you exactly how it happened and why it matters. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next piece of this story. Before we go any further, I need you to sit with something for just a moment. Because one of the things true crime gets wrong over and over again is that it reduces victims to their final moments, their last known location, their last text message, their last breath. And in doing that, it strips away the one thing that makes any of this matter in the first place: the person. So let me tell you about Kayla before the night everything went wrong. Kayla Simmons was 24 years old and the kind of woman people remembered after one conversation, not because she was loud about it, but because she paid attention in a way most people don't. She remembered things: your nephew's name, the job interview you mentioned 2 months ago, whether you took sugar in your coffee. Her mother, Denise, described her as someone who came out of the womb already knowing who she was. She never needed anybody to tell her she was enough, she just knew, from the time she was small. She worked 2 jobs, a customer service role during the week and a weekend gig doing hair out of a small salon space she rented with a friend. She was saving up. Not for anything specific yet, just saving, because she'd grown up watching what happened when you didn't have a cushion under you, and she swore to herself that would never be her story. She had a plan for her life, a quiet, specific, achievable plan. And DeMarco Williams was not in that plan, not anymore. She had met DeMarco 3.5 years earlier through a mutual friend at a birthday party in the East Bay. He was charming in a particular way, attentive, magnetic, the kind of man who made you feel like the most interesting person in the room when he was talking to you. For the first year, their friends thought they were perfect together. For the second year, Kayla's closest friends started noticing small things: the way she changed her plans when he texted, the way she explained herself when she was late to a dinner, the way she laughed off comments he made in public that weren't quite compliments. Her best friend Naomi said she brought it up once. "I just told her what I saw, and she said I was reading too much into it, that he was just protective. That's how he shows love. I let it go. I wish I hadn't let it go." By the third year, Kayla had started quietly building her exit. She didn't announce it, she didn't post about it, she didn't talk to DeMarco about it directly. She just started making small moves, spending more nights at her own apartment, taking her name off their shared streaming accounts, quietly removing the spare key she'd given him from her keychain. She told Naomi in December that she was almost ready. She said she just needed the right moment, not a dramatic moment, just a calm one. She said she wanted to be able to look him in the eye and say it clearly and then leave. No argument, no screaming, just done. That moment came in January. What Kayla didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that DeMarco had been watching her pull away for months. Not with suspicion at first, more like anxiety, the low-grade, constant kind, the kind that makes a person check their phone too many times and read too deeply into a 2-word text response. His sister, speaking to investigators months later, would describe him during this period as someone who had become unrecognizable. "He was obsessed, that's the only word for it. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating right. He kept telling me she was pulling away and I kept telling him, okay, so let her, but he couldn't. He literally could not process the idea of her choosing to leave." The week before Kayla came over, DeMarco had sent her 47 text messages in a single day. She had responded to 11 of them. He had called her 14 times. She had answered twice. In the last voicemail he left her that week, a voicemail investigators would later recover and describe as chilling, he told her he couldn't imagine a version of his life that didn't include her. He said if she ever left him, he didn't know what he would do. He said he meant that. Kayla's family says she knew the relationship had become unhealthy. They say she had even spoken to a counselor about the best way to end things with someone who shows signs of emotional dependency. She had done her homework. She had a plan. She would go over on a weeknight when his stepfather was likely to be around. She would keep it brief. She would be firm but kind, and she would leave quickly before it had a chance to escalate. It was a good plan. The only flaw in it was that she was making it about someone whose capacity for a calm response she had fundamentally misjudged. She arrived at his apartment at 6:44 in the evening. At 9:02 p.m., a figure matching DeMarco's build was seen behind the wheel of Kayla's car. The drive to the cul-de-sac took 12 minutes. The walk back to his mother's house took 23. By the time Kayla's sister started calling her phone and getting voicemail, DeMarco was already home. Already planning his next move. Already deciding exactly what kind of grieving boyfriend he was going to be. This is the part that investigators will spend weeks trying to get their heads around. Not the crime itself. Crimes happen, people snap, relationships collapse into violence with a speed that still stuns even the most experienced detectives. What will take them longer to process is what comes after. Because starting from the moment DeMarco got back home that night, everything he does, every single decision, every interaction, every word he speaks, will be deliberate. Calculated. Performed. He is going to become the most helpful suspect investigators have ever encountered. And that is going to be the most dangerous thing about him. Let's go back to that evening, minute by minute, because the timeline of what happened the night Kayla disappeared is not just important, it's everything. It's the thread that once investigators start pulling it, unravels DeMarco completely. The problem is that for the first several days, nobody realizes they're already holding it. 5:58 p.m., Kayla finishes her shift and stops at a gas station on her way across town. A pump camera captures her filling her tank, checking her phone, tucking it back into her pocket. She looks calm, focused, like someone who has made up her mind. 6:11 p.m. she receives a text from DeMarco. It reads, "Are you still coming over?" She replies 4 minutes later, "I can only come by for a bit today." He responds immediately, "That's fine, doors open." That's fine, doors open, 2 sentences. Investigators will later note that this is not the message of a man who expects a breakup conversation. This is the message of a man who is confident she is coming back to him tonight like she always does. A man who has not processed the weight of what she is about to say. Or possibly, and this will be debated, a man who has already decided it won't matter what she says. 6:44 p.m. Kayla's car enters the apartment complex. A doorbell camera belonging to a second-floor resident captures 17 seconds of footage. Her car pulling in, parking crookedly, the door opening, Kayla getting out. She's wearing a dark jacket, carrying a small bag. She doesn't look around. She walks directly toward the entrance. This is the last confirmed footage of Kayla Simmons alive. 17 seconds. That's all we have of her last walk. What happens inside that apartment over the next 2 hours and 18 minutes is something investigators will piece together slowly, carefully, using forensic evidence, cell data, and the accounts of a man who is lying about nearly all of it. What we know for certain is this. At 8:57 p.m., Kayla's phone sends its last signal. It pings a tower directly adjacent to DeMarco's complex. After that, nothing. The phone either dies or is deliberately disabled. Investigators will later determine it was powered off manually. At 9:02 p.m., Kayla's car is captured on a traffic camera leaving the complex. The vehicle's speed and lane positioning indicate an unfamiliar driver, someone who doesn't know the car, someone who doesn't drive it regularly. At 9:04 p.m., the car runs a yellow light it didn't need to run. If Kayla were driving, a woman who had driven this route dozens of times, she would have stopped. She always stopped at that light. Her sister will confirm this when investigators ask. At 9:07 p.m., the car makes a right turn that goes nowhere useful. A left would have taken it toward the freeway. A left would have made sense for someone heading home. The right leads into a quiet grid of residential streets, wide sidewalks, low lighting, the kind of neighborhood where a person can stop a car and get out without anyone calling it in. At 9:14 p.m., the car stops moving. A residential camera on Hollister Court captures it parking, engine off, lights going dark. At 9:17 p.m., a figure exits the driver's side. Broad shoulders, a deliberate walk, hood up, face angled slightly downward. The figure does not look around nervously. It does not hurry. It walks at a pace that a neighbor watching from a window would later describe as, quote, normal, like someone who lived around here. At 9:41 p.m., the same figure, same build, same hoodie, same unhurried pace is picked up by a camera on Meridian Avenue, 4 blocks from DeMarco's mother's house. At 9:49 p.m., it arrives at the front door. The door opens before it knocks. Now here's what DeMarco tells investigators when they first ask about his evening. He says Kayla came over, they hung out, watched some TV, he played a video game for a while, she seemed fine, normal, happy even. He says she left around 9, said she was going to see her friend Maria, he opened the garage door for her as she left. He says he texted her after she left, just checking in, no response, figured she was with her friend, figured she'd text back in the morning. He says he wasn't worried until the next day when her sister called him. Every single part of this account will be contradicted by the physical evidence. The garage door logs will show no activation at 9:00 p.m. The cell tower data will show Kayla's phone never moved toward Maria's house. The traffic cameras will show Kayla's car going in the opposite direction entirely. And most damningly, DeMarco's own phone will place him on Meridian Avenue at 9:41 p.m., not inside his apartment watching his girlfriend drive away safely but walking, outside, in the dark, in the direction of his mother's house. He tells investigators he went for a walk to clear his head. He was worried about her. He says this with complete eye contact and a steady voice, and the officer taking notes writes it down without pushing back. This is one of the critical moments in the early investigation that will later draw scrutiny. Not because the officer does anything wrong exactly, but because the window for catching DeMarco off guard, the window where his story still has gaps he hasn't had time to rehearse around, is closing fast. Every hour that passes is an hour DeMarco uses to sharpen his account, to remember which details feel too specific, to soften the edges of anything that might catch. By the time a more senior detective sits across from him 24 hours later, DeMarco Williams will have had an entire night to become the most believable version of a worried boyfriend. And he will have used every minute of it. Kayla's sister Brianna is the one who makes the call. She makes it at 7:14 the following morning after Kayla doesn't show up to a breakfast they'd planned, doesn't answer her phone, and hasn't been active on any of her social media since the night before. Brianna is not a dramatic person, she does not jump to conclusions, but she also knows her sister, and Kayla does not go silent, not overnight, not without a word. The dispatcher who takes her call would later describe her voice as calm but urgent, like someone who had already decided what they believed and was trying very hard to be taken seriously anyway. Sheriff's Department, I'm looking for Kayla Simmons, this is her sister. She went to see her boyfriend last night and nobody's heard from her since. The dispatcher asks the standard questions. How long has she been unreachable? Does she do this often? Could she have stayed somewhere unplanned? Brianna answers all of them precisely. No, she doesn't do this. No, she always texts. And the boyfriend, she says the name slowly, clearly, his name is DeMarco Williams. She says it like a fact, not like an accusation, just, this is the last place she went and this is the name of the man who lives there. Dispatch logs the call and sends an officer to the family home to take a formal report. The officer who arrives, a patrol deputy named Tors, will describe the family as composed, organized, and already one step ahead of the investigation in terms of information gathered. Kayla's mother, Denise, had already printed a timeline. She had Kayla's last known location, the exact time she'd left for DeMarco's, the name and address of the friend Kayla had allegedly told DeMarco she was going to see afterwards. She slid it across the table to the officer like she'd been waiting for him. Deputy Tors takes the report and within the hour has passed 3 critical pieces of information up the chain. First, Kayla's last confirmed destination was DeMarco Williams' apartment, which she reached at approximately 6:44 p.m. the previous evening. Second, DeMarco had allegedly made statements in the past, not to police but to Kayla directly and to mutual friends, suggesting that if Kayla ever broke up with him, something bad would happen. The language varied depending on who was recounting it. Sometimes it was "I don't know what I'd do." Sometimes it was more explicit, but the thread was consistent. This was a man who had communicated more than once that the relationship ending was not an option he could accept. Third, Kayla's car had already been found not by police but by Kayla's cousin, who had been driving around the neighborhood posting flyers and spotted it 3 blocks from Hollister Court, parked quietly against a curb, door unlocked, keys in the ignition. The car had been there all night. Nobody had called it in. The car is towed and processed. What forensics finds inside shifts the investigation immediately. Kayla's phone is not in the car, her wallet is not in the car. Her bag, the small one she was carrying in the doorbell footage, is not in the car. What is in the car? The seat pushed all the way back. Kayla was 5'4". She drove with the seat forward close to the wheel. The seat is pushed back as far as it goes to a position that would suit someone significantly taller. The infotainment system is extracted and analyzed. The navigation history is intact. The last address entered into the system, entered at 9:01 p.m. the previous evening, is not Maria's house. It is not Kayla's apartment. It is an address investigators don't immediately recognize, a street in a quiet residential grid roughly 2 miles from the complex, an address that means nothing to them yet. Within 24 hours, it will mean everything. While the car is being processed, a second officer has been dispatched to DeMarco's apartment. The initial contact is brief, conversational, and by all accounts unremarkable. DeMarco opens the door looking tired. He invites the officer in immediately. He says he's been trying to reach Kayla all morning. He shows his phone, the call log, the undelivered texts, the string of messages going back weeks that he frames as evidence of how close they were. He says she left around 9, said she was going to Maria's. He figured she stayed the night. He figured she'd call in the morning. The officer notes in his report, subject appeared cooperative, visibly concerned, no signs of deception detected. That report will be reviewed by a senior detective the following morning with a very different read. Because here's what the first officer doesn't know yet. He doesn't know about the seat position. He doesn't know about the navigation entry. He doesn't know that the CCTV footage being pulled from 3 different cameras along the route the car took will, within 48 hours, paint a picture of that evening that looks nothing like what DeMarco is describing. And he doesn't know, can't know yet, that while he is standing in DeMarco's living room asking gentle questions and being offered a glass of water, the thing that would answer all of those questions is directly above their heads. In the attic, 12 feet up. Waiting. Kayla's family, meanwhile, is not waiting for the investigation to catch up. By the afternoon of the first day, they have organized a search grid, printed and distributed over 300 flyers, and contacted 2 local news stations. Denise gives a brief statement to a reporter outside the family home. She is measured. She does not accuse anyone by name. She says only that her daughter went to visit someone she knew and did not come home and that she needs the public's help finding her. When the reporter asks if police have any leads, Denise looks directly at the camera. They know where she went, they know who she went to see. I trust that they're doing their jobs. It is the most restrained possible way of saying exactly what she believes. And it is the beginning of a pressure campaign that will push this investigation forward at every moment it threatens to stall. Denise Simmons is not going to let her daughter become a cold case. Even if she has to make that impossible herself. By the second day of the investigation, detectives have enough to move DeMarco from a person of interest to the primary suspect in Kayla's disappearance. The car evidence, the timeline gaps, the cell data placing him outside his apartment the same night Kayla vanished, the voicemail, the seat position. What they don't have yet is anything they can take to a DA. So they do the next best thing. They sit down with him again. Detective Anita Reyes has been doing this for 11 years. She specializes in domestic homicide cases, and she has a particular skill that her colleagues describe in slightly different ways as making people feel safe enough to destroy themselves. She doesn't push, she doesn't confront, she creates space and then she watches what fills it. When she arrives at DeMarco's apartment with her partner, Detective Chris Acaffer, they are carrying nothing. No folders, no visible notes. Nothing that signals this is anything other than a follow-up conversation between people who are all on the same side. DeMarco lets them in immediately. He offers them coffee. The interview lasts 1 hour and 40 minutes. At no point does DeMarco ask for a lawyer. At no point does he decline to answer a question. He is, by every surface measure, the ideal cooperative witness. But beneath the surface, Reyes is cataloging. She notices that when she asks about the night Kayla left, DeMarco's account is too smooth. Not the smoothness of someone telling the truth and trusting their memory. The smoothness of a rehearsed narrative, one that hits the same beats in the same order without the natural stumbling and self-correction that genuine recollection produces. She notices that he volunteers information, small, specific details that feel like they're designed to preempt the next question. He mentions the video game before she asks about the evening. He mentions opening the garage door before she asks how Kayla left. He says she seemed happy before Reyes has used the word at all. She notices that he cries exactly once at the exact moment in the conversation where crying would be most expected, and then stops cleanly and continues talking. She notices that he uses Kayla's name in the past tense twice before correcting himself. The conversation shifts. Reyes asks about the relationship, not accusatorially, with curiosity, warmth, even like she's genuinely interested in who they were together. DeMarco says they were solid, up and down like any couple, but fundamentally solid. He says Kayla was his person. He uses that phrase, my person. Reyes asks if there had been any tension lately. DeMarco pauses just briefly, then he says there had been some distance recently, sure. Kayla had been busy with work, he'd been giving her space, things were fine. Reyes asks about the 47 texts. DeMarco's expression doesn't change. But something behind his eyes does. I mean, yeah, I was reaching out a lot that week, I missed her, we hadn't been spending as much time together and I missed her. Is that a crime? He says that last sentence with a small laugh, inviting Reyes to laugh with him, to normalize it. She doesn't laugh. She writes something in her notebook. She moves on. Acaffer takes over for the next segment, asking about the walk. DeMarco says it again, he went for a walk to clear his head. He was worried, he couldn't sit still, so he walked. Acaffer asks which direction. DeMarco describes a route that takes him away from Meridian Avenue. Acaffer nods, writes it down, and moves on. He does not tell DeMarco that the camera on Meridian already has him. He does not tell him that the triangulated cell data from that night maps his movements with a precision that his verbal account cannot explain away. He simply writes it down and moves on, and DeMarco visibly relaxes. This is the moment Reyes will later describe as the turn, not a turn in the conversation. DeMarco doesn't confess, doesn't slip up, but a turn in her understanding of who she is dealing with. He relaxed because he thought he'd gotten away with the lie. And the way he relaxed so completely, so quickly, that's not how an innocent person behaves when the topic changes. An innocent person stays tense because the whole situation is frightening. A guilty person relaxes when a specific threat passes. He relaxed because that specific question was over. That told me everything. At the end of the interview, Reyes makes the ask. She tells DeMarco they'd like to do a forensic download of his phone, just to confirm his movements, verify his timeline, rule things out. She frames it as a formality, something they're doing with everyone connected to Kayla. DeMarco says yes before she finishes the sentence. He hands over his phone with both hands, like he's offering a gift. Reyes signs out the device and schedules the download for that afternoon. And then, because there's one more thing to address, she asks about the car. DeMarco drove himself to the follow-up interview in his stepfather's SUV. Officers had already noted on the way into the parking lot that the vehicle was riding low at the rear, that items were piled behind the back seats obscured under what appeared to be bedding. Reyes asks if she can take a look. DeMarco says it's his stepfather's car, not his, so technically he can't give consent, but he'll open the back so she can see inside. This is a careful, legal answer, not a refusal, not a yes. A technically correct middle position that creates the maximum amount of plausible cooperation while limiting actual access. Reyes notes this. She looks at what she can see: blankets, a pillow, a crumpled fast food bag, a water bottle. She asks if any of it belongs to Kayla. DeMarco says no, he says it's just stuff from the drive-in. He and Kayla used to park and watch movies from the back sometimes. The stuff had just been there since their last trip. Reyes asks when that was. DeMarco pauses. Maybe 2 weeks ago, 3, I'd have to think about it. Reyes nods. She does not push further. She cannot, she has no warrant, and DeMarco has not technically refused anything. She closes her notebook. She thanks him for his time. And as she walks back to her car, she calls Akefer. Get me a warrant for that vehicle, and find out where the stepfather was the night Kayla disappeared. The phone download fails. The following morning, the tech team informs Reyes that the extraction was unsuccessful, a file corruption during the process that left them with partial, unusable data. This happens, it is not unheard of, but the timing of it combined with everything else makes Reyes deeply uneasy. She begins to consider the possibility that it was not an accident. She begins to think about what a man who hands over his phone that willingly might have done to it before handing it over. She begins to build a different theory, one in which DeMarco Williams is not just cooperative. One in which he is several moves ahead. On the 5th day after Kayla's disappearance, investigators execute a search warrant on DeMarco's apartment. They do not tell him they're coming. They arrive at 6:47 in the morning, 12 officers in total, moving in a formation that assumes resistance and finds none. The apartment is empty. DeMarco and his stepfather are both gone. The door comes open. And then something hits the first officer through the doorway so hard and so immediately that she stops walking. She holds up her fist, the team behind her stops. She says quietly, "Smell that." Every law enforcement professional who has encountered the smell of human decomposition describes it the same way. Not like anything else, not like rot in the general sense. It is specific and total, and once you have smelled it, you do not mistake it for anything else ever again. The officer at the doorway has smelled it twice before in her career. She is not mistaken. The team moves through the apartment systematically. Living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, the bathroom, everything is surface level normal, lived in, slightly messy, nothing immediately alarming. But the smell is not evenly distributed. It thickens as they move toward the rear of the apartment. It concentrates near the laundry room. And above the laundry room is an attic access panel, recessed into the ceiling, painted over several times and slightly misaligned in a way that suggests it has been opened and closed recently. Someone has been up there. Recently. The K9 unit arrives within the hour. The dog, a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois named Scout, works the apartment in quadrants. She moves efficiently through the front rooms, pausing briefly at the bathroom, continuing. When she enters the hallway toward the laundry room, her pace changes. She begins working more slowly, more deliberately. At the wall adjacent to the laundry room door, she stops completely. She sits. She stares at the handler. Then she raises one paw and begins to scratch at the wall. In K9 cadaver work, a dog scratching at a surface is among the most significant alerts possible. It means the odor is directional, coming from behind or above the surface, not dispersed from a distant source. The dog knows something is on the other side. The handler pulls her back, runs her through the rest of the apartment, brings her back to the laundry room wall a second time. Same response: sit, stare, scratch. The handler says quietly, "She's got something." What investigators find when they open the attic access panel will require the kind of clinical detachment that only comes from years of training. I am going to tell you what they found without the details that belong only to Kayla and her family. What I will tell you is this. Kayla was there. And DeMarco had not simply hidden her, he had made preparations. The kind of preparations that require time and deliberateness and a specific kind of cold that most people cannot access. Investigators will later estimate he had spent the better part of 2 nights in that attic. Working. Planning what came next. The laundry room below the attic tells its own story. There is bleach, a significant amount of it, enough that the smell cuts through the other smell when you get close enough. Cleaning supplies stacked in a way that looks deliberate rather than domestic. The shower curtain is missing from the bathroom, its rod and rings are intact, the curtain itself is gone. There is a dark stain near the base of the laundry room wall that has been partially cleaned. Luminol testing will later reveal the extent of it. What's visible to the naked eye is, as one investigator puts it in their report, the perimeter of an attempt. Someone cleaned this room with urgency and thoroughness, but not quite enough of either. DeMarco's bedroom, revisited now with different eyes, tells a slightly different story than it did on that first walkthrough. The mess that the first officer had noted and dismissed is not random. There is a particular kind of chaos that happens when a space is searched quickly and reorganized in a hurry, and it looks slightly different from the chaos of a person who simply doesn't clean up after themselves. The drawers have been opened and closed too many times. The closet has items at the front that don't match the season. The area under the bed is clear in a way that stands out. Every other surface in the room has something on it, but the floor under the bed has been swept. Swept, not vacuumed, swept with something wide, leaving faint parallel lines in the carpet fibers. Forensics photographs all of it. Every detail matters now. Every detail is evidence of intent. At 11:43 a.m., Detective Reyes receives a call from the forensics lead on site. She listens for 40 seconds without speaking. When she hangs up, she tells Okafor, "This is a homicide. We're treating it as a homicide from this point forward." She calls the DA's office. She calls Kayla's family. That last call is the hardest one she will make in this investigation. Denise Simmons has been expecting it and not expecting it simultaneously, the way parents do when they already know but haven't been told. Reyes doesn't have to say much. Denise says, "Find him." Reyes says, "We will." She means it. Here is what DeMarco Williams does in the 48 hours before investigators return with a warrant for his arrest. He vanishes. Not dramatically, not in the way fugitives vanish in movies with a bag already packed and a car idling in the alley. He vanishes in the way that only someone who has been mentally preparing for this moment could manage methodically, leaving behind just enough presence to slow down the search. On the day investigators execute the search warrant on the apartment, DeMarco is already 2 hours away, staying with a college friend in a city where he has no obvious connections. He has left his primary cell phone at his mother's house, powered on, charged, pinging towers near her address, a deliberate misdirection that will cost investigators 18 hours. He is using a second phone. A number his sister eventually provides reluctantly after 2 hours of conversation with Detective Reyes, in which she makes it clear that she has already figured out what her brother did and that she is choosing to be on the right side of it. "When I saw the flyer for Kayla," his sister tells investigators, "I looked at him and I just knew. You know how you know something before you can explain why you know it? I knew, and I told him to leave. I told him I wanted nothing to do with this." She pauses. "He cried, he actually cried, and I remember thinking that's the first real thing I've seen from him since this started, and even then he wasn't crying for her, he was crying for himself." The mother, Alicia, is a harder read. Police visit her twice. The first time she says she hasn't seen DeMarco since before Kayla disappeared. The second time they search her house and find his phone in a green Hawaiian shirt in her upstairs closet. She explains this without embarrassment. She says DeMarco left it with her for safekeeping. She says she didn't think it was relevant. Detective Reyes watches her say this and notes in her report, "Subject appeared undisturbed by the discovery." No indication of remorse or recognition that she was obstructing an active murder investigation. When Reyes asks directly whether Alicia believes her son had something to do with Kayla's disappearance, Alicia says no, definitively, without a pause. She then describes, unprompted, how DeMarco had once spent 2 days building Kayla a custom edible arrangement for Valentine's Day because he couldn't afford to buy one. She tells this story with warmth. She tells it while standing in a house being searched by homicide detectives. This too will go in the report. The phone recovered from Alicia's closet has been wiped. A factory reset performed within the last 72 hours, everything gone. Contacts, messages, location history, app data. The forensics team will spend 3 days attempting a recovery and retrieve fragments, partial GPS coordinates, cached map data, the ghost of a deleted thread that are suggestive but not definitive. What they do recover clearly because it is stored in a way that survives a basic wipe is the navigation history. 11 searches in the week before Kayla disappeared. 3 of them for locations in the Sierra Nevada foothills, remote access roads, areas with low cell coverage and infrequent traffic. Areas where someone who needed to be unseen could be unseen. The locations are flagged, search teams are notified, and investigators now understand something new about the scope of what DeMarco was planning, not just in terms of hiding evidence but in terms of how long he had been planning it. This was not a crime of passion followed by panic. This was a crime of passion followed by preparation. Those are two very different things, and the difference matters for what investigators do next. Over the following 2 weeks, DeMarco moves 3 more times, from the college friend's apartment to a motel outside Sacramento paid for in cash, from the motel to his stepfather's cousin's house in Stockton, from Stockton to, and this is the one that finally gives investigators a solid location, a friend's apartment complex back in the Bay Area. The irony of this is not lost on the task force. He runs 200 miles in every direction and ends up back where he started. The lead that breaks his location comes from an anonymous tip to the investigation's public hotline. A woman's voice, calm and deliberate, giving an apartment number and a complex name and then hanging up. Investigators will never officially confirm who made that call. Unofficially, Reyes has her suspicions. She doesn't follow up on them. She has other things to do. The task force that assembles for the arrest of DeMarco Williams on the morning of June 14 consists of 9 officers, 2 detectives, a crisis negotiation unit on standby, and a department tissue breaching tool that nobody wants to use but everyone knows may be necessary. They have a murder warrant. They have a location. They have been here in this exact configuration twice before on this case, once at the apartment, once at Alicia's house, and both times they came away empty. Nobody is treating this as a formality. The Skyview complex sits on the eastern edge of the city, a cluster of 2-story buildings arranged around a central courtyard, 3 entry points, 1 parking structure. The apartment they're looking for is on the 2nd floor, corner unit with a window facing the courtyard and a fire escape that the advance team has already quietly positioned someone beneath. They approach at 6:22 a.m. when foot traffic in the complex is at its minimum. Reyes takes the lead position at the door. She knocks firmly and announces, "Police, search warrant, open the door." Inside the apartment there is movement, audible through the door. The kind of movement that reads as, someone is awake, someone is surprised, and someone is deciding. 20 seconds pass. 30. Reyes knocks again, open the door and do it now. 45 seconds after the first knock, the door opens. DeMarco Williams appears in the doorway holding a kitchen knife. Not in a fighting stance, not raised, held downward at his side in a way that could be read as passive if you weren't trained to understand what it means when a person answers a police knock holding any blade at all. Reyes gives the command. 3 officers respond. What happens in the next 11 seconds is documented in the after-action report, the body camera footage reviewed by Internal Affairs, and the official statement released the following morning by the department's chief of police. DeMarco Williams is shot. Medical aid is rendered immediately and continuously until paramedics arrive 7 minutes later. He is pronounced dead at the scene at 7:04 a.m. There is no arrest. There is no trial. There is no courtroom moment, no witness stand, no cross-examination, no sentence handed down by a judge while Kayla's family watches from the gallery. This is the part of the story that the news coverage will spend 2 paragraphs on and the family will spend years inside. Because here is what DeMarco's death takes from Kayla's family, it takes the answer. Not the what, they know the what, the evidence makes the what undeniable. The why. The specific, detailed, spoken out loud why that a trial might have produced. Why that night, why that way? What happened in that apartment in those 2 hours and 18 minutes between the time Kayla walked in and the time her phone went dark? That answer died in a doorway in the Bay Area at 7:04 in the morning. And Kayla's family will carry that gap for the rest of their lives. The press conference is brief. The chief of police stands behind a podium outside the department's main entrance and reads from a prepared statement. He confirms that DeMarco Williams had been charged with the first-degree murder of Kayla Simmons prior to the confrontation at the Skyview complex. He confirms that Williams was killed during an armed encounter while officers attempted to serve the warrant. He confirms that the case is being classified as a homicide and that the investigation into Kayla's disappearance has reached its conclusion. He does not take questions. He thanks the public for their support. He expresses condolences to Kayla's family. He walks back inside. 3 days later. Searchers working the Sierra Nevada foothills, acting on the GPS fragments recovered from DeMarco's wiped phone, find human remains in a remote area off a service road that sees less than a dozen vehicles a month. The remains are scattered, animals weather time. A forensic odontologist works through the night using Kayla's dental records. The confirmation comes back at 6:51 the following morning. It is Kayla. She is home. Denise Simmons releases a statement through the family's attorney. It is 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph thanks everyone who searched, who shared, who called the tip line, who stood outside with a candle, who did not let Kayla become invisible. The second paragraph says that Kayla was more than this story, more than the last night of her life, more than the decisions of a man who could not accept that she had chosen herself. She was a daughter, a sister, a best friend, a woman with a plan and a laugh that filled a room and a way of making coffee that her mother is not ready to describe, yet because she is not ready for that detail to become past tense. The third paragraph is short. It says, "We are not done, we did not get everything we needed, and we will continue to seek it." Alicia Williams is briefly detained for questioning following the discovery at the apartment. She is not charged. The DA's office reviews the evidence related to the phone, the deliberate misdirection, the wiped device, the phone found in her closet, and determines that what exists is insufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she knew the nature of what her son had done versus simply protecting him out of the reflexive loyalty that parents sometimes offer their children even when they should not. She is released. She does not make a public statement. She does not attend the memorial for Kayla. Kayla Simmons was 24 years old. She had a plan. She had a savings account she checked every Friday morning. She had a best friend she texted good morning to every single day without exception. She had a mother who knew exactly how she took her coffee and is not ready to talk about it yet. She had a future. A specific, possible, almost within reach future that she had built carefully and quietly while the people around her were busy with their own. DeMarco Williams took that future in an apartment living room on a Tuesday night in January because he had decided, somewhere in the dark architecture of his mind, in a place no courtroom will ever fully illuminate now, that the only version of Kayla's future he could accept was one that included him. Kayla's family launched a petition 3 months after her remains were identified. The petition calls for a formal review of the initial investigation, specifically the first 48 hours in which several opportunities to confront DeMarco with evidence were either missed or deliberately deferred. It calls for mandatory body camera review in domestic disappearance cases in which a partner is identified as a person of interest within the first 24 hours. It calls most pointedly for stronger accountability standards for family members who obstruct investigations involving deceased victims. That last clause is about Alicia. Everyone knows it is about Alicia. As of this recording, the petition has over 60,000 signatures. The DA's office has not responded publicly. Alicia has not been charged. I want to end this by telling you something about Naomi, Kayla's best friend. Naomi was the one who noticed things were off in the relationship 2 years before Kayla died. She was the one who said something and then let it go when Kayla pushed back. She has spent every day since the identification carrying that. In an interview with a local journalist published 4 months after Kayla was found, she said something that I have not been able to stop thinking about. She said, "I keep replaying the conversation where I let it go, and I keep thinking about all the people who have that same conversation every day, who see something small and strange and wrong in someone they love and they mention it once and then they let it go." She said, "I don't think I did anything wrong, I also don't think I did enough." She said, "I just want people to stop letting it go even when it's uncomfortable, even when you're not sure, even when they push back, don't let it go." Kayla Simmons made one mistake in her final chapter. She believed that a calm, kind, well-planned ending could protect her from a person who had already decided there was no acceptable ending. She was thoughtful, careful, and right about almost everything. She was wrong about that one thing. And it cost her everything she had worked so hard to build. If this story stayed with you, please share it, not for the algorithm, for Kayla. Subscribe to Time with X. Every story we tell with the same intention, to make sure the people who deserved more than what happened to them are not forgotten.